On the early morning of August 8th Eastern Time, the Senate chamber was brightly lit. A marathon voting session that had lasted the entire night finally settled on a number just before dawn. 50 to 49, a difference of just one vote. With that vote cast, the supreme command of the entire FBI, the highest law enforcement agency in the United States, and tons of thousands of federal prosecutors across the country changed hands. Todd Blanche was officially written into the nearly 250-year history of the U.S. Department of Justice. He became the second Attorney General officially confirmed during Trump's second term. But friends, things are not that simple. Trump's nomination of him almost completely fell through due to defections within the Republican Party. Later, the Senate vote on him brought to light a slush fund amounting to $1.776 billion. What kind of shady political compromises are hidden in all this? More importantly, who is Todd Blanche? Why did this seemingly ordinary nomination spark such huge controversy? And why does his appointment make Washington so uneasy? To understand who Todd Blanche is, we must look back at where he started. He was born on August 6, 1974, in Denver, Colorado, and just turned 52 this year. If you look at his resume alone, Blanche's starting point wasn't exactly dazzling. He didn't attend any of the top-tier American law schools like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, or Columbia. He attended Brooklyn Law School, a long-established law school in New York. While it has a solid reputation, it is definitely not considered a top-tier law school. And notice a detail here. He didn't earn his Juris Doctor degree until 2003, by which time he was already 29 years old. Getting a JD at that age suggests he wasn't just a bookish elite who went straight through school. He had real-world experience. After graduating from law school, he spent 2 years as a federal judicial clerk, known in the industry as a clerk. He worked for 2 different federal judges in succession. Friends, take note. Being a federal judicial clerk is an extremely high honor in the American legal field. Many people fight tooth and nail just to get in. This experience directly determined Blanche's future path. In 2006, he joined the most formidable institution in the entire country, the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, known in the industry as the SDNY. I have to say a little more about this place because you'll understand why as you keep listening. The name SDNY will come up repeatedly from here on out, and it carries a tremendous amount of weight. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York is renowned as the most independent federal prosecutorial agency in the country, specializing in high-stakes cases. From Wall Street financial fraud and public corruption to gang violence, large-scale drug trafficking, and terrorism, almost every major high-profile case that captures national attention comes out of this office. In the industry, this office has a rather imposing nickname, the Sovereign District of New York. It means that we don't even care about the Department of Justice headquarters in Washington. We are loyal only to the law. Blanche has been working here for nearly a decade. He started from the very bottom as an assistant United States attorney and worked his way up, eventually becoming a co-chief of the Violent Crimes Unit, overseeing about 20 prosecutors who specialize in prosecuting murder, kidnapping, rape, and gang-related cases. Folks, this point is crucial. Blanche isn't the type of technical lawyer who sits in a high-end office drafting documents. He's someone who has fought real, tough battles in court against serious criminals. Homicide cases, gang cases. Can you imagine the scene of going head-to-head in court against a gang defense attorney? And there's a little side story here. Keep this in mind. It'll come in handy later. When Blanche was working at the SDNY, he had a colleague named Alvin Bragg. Does that name sound a bit familiar? That's right. He's the Manhattan district attorney who later prosecuted Trump in the hush money case and successfully got him convicted on 34 felony counts. Alvin and Blanche were once old colleagues in the same office. Back in the day, they chased down criminals and busted gangs together. Years later, they became adversaries, with one sitting at the prosecution table and the other at the defense table. Is this a twist of fate or an irony of history? Let's keep watching. In 2014, Blanche made a spectacular career pivot. He took off his prosecutor's robe and joined one of Wall Street's top-tier law firms, kicking off the second peak of his life as a white-collar criminal defense attorney at a top-tier firm. He first spent 3 years at a law firm called WilmerHale, and then in 2017, he jumped ship to an even older and more prestigious firm, Cadwalader, Wickersham & Taft. What's the deal with this firm? It was founded in 1792, a full 78 years before the U.S. Department of Justice was even established. It is the oldest and most prestigious law firm in New York, specializing in serving the big giants and major players on Wall Street. To land a partner position at a firm like this, your annual income starts at 7 figures in USD at the very least. Blanche was the partner there, specifically handling white-collar criminal defense and internal government investigations. He was one of the star litigators at this old-school law firm. It was during this period that he began to brush up against the fringes of Trump's world. In 2019, he took on a high-stakes case representing Paul Manafort, the chairman of Trump's 2016 campaign. At the time, Manafort had already been sent to federal prison by special counsel Mueller due to the Russia investigation, but the local Manhattan District Attorney's Office in New York, take note, this is the same office we just mentioned, the one helmed by Alvin Bragg that eventually brought Trump to court. They were also trying to go after Manafort at the time, determined to prosecute him again under New York state law, aiming to secure a conviction for mortgage fraud. Facing the prosecution's charges, Blanche played a brilliant legal card at the time, the double jeopardy principle from the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. The argument was that if the federal government has already tried a case, the local authorities cannot simply rebrand and prosecute it all over again. And he won. The Manhattan court ruled to dismiss the case. Friends, remember this moment. In the same Manhattan criminal court, with the same Manhattan District Attorney's Office, Blanche successfully helped Trump's campaign chairman get acquitted here. Years later, he would have to face prosecution from that same office and this very same courtroom, fighting another life-or-death battle for Trump himself. Only that time, he lost, but Trump trusted him even more. Why is that? We'll get to that later. During his years at the Cadwalader law firm, Blanche also represented several key figures in Trump's circle, such as Giuliani's aide Igor Fruman and Boris Epshteyn, a key advisor in Trump's core team. Friends, do you see the pattern? Long before officially becoming Trump's personal lawyer, Blanche had already become one of the most trusted defense attorneys in Trump's inner circle. But if you think Blanche is some kind of die-hard, dyed-in-the-wool Trump supporter, you'd be very wrong. This person's political leanings will really surprise you. We'll get to that later. Fast forward to late March 2023, and Trump was at the darkest moment of his life. He was facing a full-scale onslaught of 4 major criminal cases: the hush money case in New York, the classified documents case in Florida, the election interference case in Georgia, and the January 6th Capitol case in Washington, D.C. 4 fronts, 4 lead prosecutors, and 88 felony charges. But in the political climate at the time, top law firms across the U.S. were all avoiding Trump like the plague. Why? Because in the eyes of the elite, taking on Trump's case back then was tantamount to professional suicide. Your peers would ostracize you and your social circle would isolate you. Industry awards you had previously won, lecture invitations from prestigious universities, high-end industry forums, all would shut their doors to you in an instant. And at that time, the legal team Trump had on hand was very good at arguing on TV and putting on a show. But when faced with the intensive and massive criminal litigation that was coming, they lacked real practical criminal courtroom experience. It was at this critical juncture that Trump's core advisor, Boris Epshteyn, the person we just mentioned, recommended someone to Trump, and that person was Todd Blanche. Soon after, Trump personally interviewed Blanche at Mar-a-Lago. Blanche's calm, low-key, and rigorous style instantly struck a chord with Trump. Trump offered terms on the spot, wanting Blanche to take the lead personally as the commander-in-chief of all his criminal cases. But at that time, Blanche didn't dare to take the job. If he were to accept, he would have to leave Cadwalader. It wasn't that he wanted to leave, but rather that there was an unspoken rule in the circles of major law firms in Washington and New York at the time. You can represent Jeffrey Epstein, you can represent Hunter Biden, you can represent Wall Street financial titans, you can represent mob bosses. Big law firms can withstand the pressure for you, but there is one person they cannot represent: Donald Trump. This is what Blanche himself said in his own words on a legal podcast in 2024. He said, "If you want to represent the former president in a criminal case, sorry, you have to leave your law firm." Faced with such a choice, Blanche took only a very short time to consider it before making a decision that shocked the entire New York legal community. He resigned from Cadwalader. A prestigious, long-standing law firm founded in 1792, a 7-figure income partnership position, he just walked away from it all. What did he resign to do? He opened his own law firm, named Blanche Law, to work full-time and exclusively for one client. That client was Trump. From May to June 2024, the lenses of global media were all pointed at the Manhattan Criminal Court in New York. In this courtroom, Trump, as the first former president in U.S. history to face a criminal trial, sat in the defendant's seat. And the lawyer sitting next to him, silent, watching every move of every witness, was Todd Blanche. The most critical witness in that trial was Trump's former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. He had already served time in prison for perjury, but the prosecution's entire case was built almost entirely on his testimony. So what did Blanche do? He didn't act like those performative lawyers on TV, shouting or giving impassioned speeches. Instead, during cross-examination, he methodically brought up Cohen's past record of lying and pointed out his contradictory statements one by one. But in the end, the jury still found Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts. After the trial concluded, Trump was extremely disappointed with the outcome of the case, but his trust in Blanche's professionalism and his confidence in him remained completely unshaken. This is actually quite rare. You might know that Trump's style when it comes to hiring is to use people when they suit him and discard them when they don't. From his 2 White House chiefs of staff, to his many former lawyers, to his various former campaign advisors, Trump's speed in turning on people is also notorious. But Blanche is an exception. Over the course of more than 3 years, it can be said that Trump's trust in Blanche himself has never wavered. I think one of the reasons is Blanche's calm, low-key, no-nonsense demeanor and his focus strictly on the law. He's not the type of political lawyer who seeks the spotlight or tries to ride Trump's coattails. He's more of a pure, client and business-focused professional litigator. And there's an even more surprising detail. For most of his time in the legal profession, his registered party affiliation was actually Democrat. You heard that right. This current defense attorney for the Trump team was registered as a Democrat for a long time, later switched to independent, and didn't officially join the Republican Party until 2024. In other words, he switched to the Republican Party only after he took on Trump's case. This shows that Blanche is, at his core, not an ideological politician. He is a professional legal practitioner who focuses strictly on the case at hand. He is defending Trump not because of any MAGA beliefs, but in his own words, he said this was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. Just think about it. A lawyer who started out as a career prosecutor at a time when 99% of his peers in the legal profession across the country are running away from Trump as fast as they can, he uses the word opportunity to describe this hot potato right in front of him. This statement alone speaks volumes about his ambition. In November 2024, as Trump won the election once again, Blanche's life entered a completely new phase he had never imagined. He stepped directly from the defense table to the highest prosecutorial office, taking charge of the nation's power to prosecute. Trump nominated him to serve as Deputy Attorney General. In March 2025, the Senate confirmed his appointment by a vote of 52 to 46. At that time, the person sitting in the top spot at the Department of Justice was Tom Bundy, the former Attorney General of Florida. As the deputy, Blanche was effectively in charge of the day-to-day operations of the entire Department of Justice. But as we all know, this arrangement didn't last long. In April of this year, Trump announced the firing of Bundy, and so Blanche naturally became the acting Attorney General. But this acting status dragged on for 4 months. The White House was eager to make his position official, but the Senate was dead set on blocking it. Why? Because infighting had broken out within the Republican Party. At the time, the Senate uncovered a hidden ledger buried deep within the Department of Justice, the very mysterious figure we mentioned at the beginning, hundreds of millions of dollars. This whole matter actually goes back to May of this year. At the time, Trump had a long-standing lawsuit with the IRS, or the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. Trump sued the IRS on the grounds that his tax returns had been leaked to the media by an insider. We actually did a show about this back then. For those who missed it, you're welcome to go watch it after finishing this episode. And this case actually started during Trump's first term. Then, in June of this year, the Department of Justice, under Blanche's acting leadership, suddenly announced that it had reached a historic settlement with Trump. What were the terms of the settlement? The Department of Justice would establish a fund and pay out $1.776 billion. The number $1.776 billion is clearly something that was carefully designed. The United States was founded in 1776. So what is this money going to be used for? It is to establish a so-called Anti-Weaponization Fund, specifically to compensate those who have been persecuted by the weaponization of the justice system, including defendants in the January 6th Capitol case, people in the Trump camp who were investigated by special counsel Jack Smith, Trump supporters who were prosecuted by the Biden Department of Justice, and so on and so forth. Theoretically, all of these people can apply to receive money. So, having said that, I'd like to ask you all, do you think establishing such a fund is reasonable? If you think it's reasonable, that it's a form of just compensation for those who have been victimized and a reckoning for those who have weaponized the justice system, give me a like to show your support. If you think there are still hidden risks or that it's not necessarily needed, that it's a bit like using taxpayer money to foot the bill for a specific group, which might create problems down the road, then give me a disagree. Or if you don't stand on either side and have other insights, please feel free to share them with us all in the comment section. Regardless of how you view this money, it has caused a massive stir within Washington. Furthermore, this settlement agreement includes a clause that grants Trump himself, his family, and the Trump Organization special protections during future tax audits. And that has caused an uproar even within the Republican Party. Texas Senator John Cornyn and North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis stated directly within the Judiciary Committee that as long as this $1.776 billion fund is not revoked, Blanche can forget about getting a formal appointment as Attorney General. This struggle between the two sides remained deadlocked until August 3rd and ultimately ended with Blanche's compromise. Blanche signed a formal order announcing the revocation of this $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund, while simultaneously making it clear that the tax audit protection for the Trump family would be limited to Trump himself and his immediate family members, and could not be extended to any peripheral executives or partners within the Trump business empire. Only then did the Senate relent, and in the early hours of August 8th, they confirmed Blanche's official appointment by a razor-thin margin of 50 to 49. At this point, the story seems to be over on the surface, but folks, the biggest controversy behind this appointment hasn't even arrived yet. The reason Washington's establishment and the legal community were so uneasy about Blanche's rise wasn't because of those dozen or so dollars, but because Blanche taking the position of Attorney General touched the most important red line in American politics. A red line that was a painful lesson learned from a constitutional crisis 50 years ago. In 1972, President Nixon appointed his campaign manager, a man named John Mitchell, to serve as Attorney General. Once Mitchell became the top law enforcement official, what did he do? He turned the Department of Justice into Nixon's personal hit squad. He used the police and intelligence agencies to wiretap anti-war activists and suppress politicians who opposed Nixon. Later, he simply resigned as Attorney General and went off to help Nixon with his re-election campaign. And what happened after that is something we're all very familiar with, the Watergate scandal. A group of people snuck into the Democratic Party headquarters to install wiretaps and were caught red-handed. After the whole thing was exposed, this former Attorney General, Mitchell, actually personally helped Nixon plan how to fabricate evidence and cover up the crimes. The result, as you can imagine, was predictable. Mitchell was ultimately convicted of obstruction of justice, perjury, and conspiracy, and went straight to federal prison, where he served 19 months. He thus became the first and only Attorney General in U.S. history to be sentenced to prison. But it didn't end there. The most dramatic climax of the Watergate scandal was the Saturday Night Massacre that took place on October 20th, 1973. At the time, an independent prosecutor named Cox was pursuing Nixon's secret White House tapes. Nixon, losing his cool, gave a direct order to the Attorney General at the time, "Fire this prosecutor for me." The Attorney General felt this was just too illegal, and he would rather resign than do such a thing, so he quit. Then Nixon went to the Deputy Attorney General, who also resigned on the spot in protest. It wasn't until they got to the third deputy that someone finally buckled under the pressure and helped Nixon get rid of the prosecutor. Overnight, the top leadership of the Department of Justice had been almost entirely purged by Nixon. This scene left Americans completely stunned and thoroughly exposed a loophole in the American system. If the Attorney General is completely the president's personal servant, then when the president himself commits a crime, who is going to hold him accountable? After suffering this major setback, Americans learned their lesson and reshaped the regulations of the Department of Justice. The most critical part of this was the establishment of the special counsel system. The core logic of this system is to solve the problem of not being able to have one's own people investigate themselves. Just think about it. If the president himself, the president's family, or his close aides are suspected of a crime, ordinary federal prosecutors wouldn't dare to investigate because the prosecutor's boss is the attorney general, and the attorney general's boss is the president. How could they possibly investigate that? So the special counsel system is essentially like building a firewall-protected box within the Department of Justice, bringing in an independent senior legal expert from outside the DOJ's hierarchy to specifically investigate cases involving the president. This person has the same powers as the federal prosecutor. They can mobilize the FBI, subpoena witnesses, and issue grand jury subpoenas. Furthermore, the Attorney General cannot simply fire them just because they are dissatisfied with the direction of the investigation. They can only be dismissed if it is proven that the special counsel has committed serious misconduct or dereliction of duty, and the reasons must be provided in writing to Congress. This is the institutional legacy left behind by the Watergate scandal. And today, the appointment of Blanche happens to touch the most sensitive nerve of this institutional legacy. How so? Before Blanche became Attorney General, he was Trump's personal criminal defense attorney, whose job was to help Trump fight lawsuits and oppose Department of Justice prosecutors. And after becoming Attorney General, he became the top official in charge of the entire national law enforcement apparatus, including the Department of Justice and the FBI. So his former enemies might now become his subordinates, and the chains of evidence he once sought to dismantle are now all within his archives. Here, there is a latent issue of conflict of interest. Suppose there are still career prosecutors within the Department of Justice who were involved in prosecuting Trump's classified documents case, or who participated in prosecuting the election interference case, etc. What about these people? They were previously Blanche's opponents, but today they have become his subordinates. So, as Attorney General, how will Blanche handle these people? And how will he deal with the ongoing legal cases against Trump that have not yet concluded? There are two possibilities. If he has ulterior motives and wants to weaponize the justice system, he might initiate political purges against those people. He could use the immense power he now holds to mobilize resources, retroactively investigate the prosecutors and investigators who once charged Trump, and turn the Department of Justice into a tool to strike at Trump's political opponents. Naturally, those people are afraid. This is one of the reasons why this appointment has triggered such a massive storm. On the other hand, if Blanche is a good, professionally driven lawyer who adheres to professional ethics, he might instead become a shock absorber and safety valve that prevents the justice system from spiraling out of control. He could potentially use the highest standards of legal expertise to strictly constrain the boundaries of law enforcement, neither staging out-of-control political retribution nor allowing the Department of Justice to fall back into the quagmire of partisan strife, thereby using the most professional approach to restore public trust in the neutrality of the American justice system. Right? Friends, which possibility do you think is more likely, corresponding to A and B respectively? Now please leave a comment and let me know. Personally, I feel that, at least from Trump's perspective, the latter is what he would prefer to see, as it is the foundation for correcting course and making America great again. So I'm voting for B. Back in 1789, when the United States was founded, the Founding Fathers were very clear when they established the position of Attorney General. The greatest danger to power never comes from opponents, but from one's own people. 250 years have passed, and from John Mitchell, who went to prison for turning the Department of Justice into a private henchman, to the sudden emergence of Todd Blanche today, that core question in American constitutional history has actually never had a standard answer. Who exactly should the Department of Justice listen to? And Blanche's rise to power has pushed this dilemma, which has plagued the United States for over 200 years, to an extreme peak. A tough-as-nails prosecutor who once took down mobsters in the Southern District of New York, and a personal attorney who gave up a multi-million-dollar salary to help Trump fight his way out of his most difficult times, has now taken the seat of the nation's top law enforcement official. Will he become the next destroyer who turns the Department of Justice into a political tool? Or will he, as many hope, use his top-tier professional expertise to clean up systemic ills and become a reformer who restores the dignity of the rule of law? History is still being written, and we can't see the answer yet. But in the United States, every attorney general, when they walk into their office, is watched by the gaze of two old men behind them. One is named James Madison, the architect of the Constitution, and the other is John Mitchell, the destroyer of the Constitution. And the red line between them is the choice that every attorney general must make. Today, Todd Blanche has already walked into this office, and as for what kind of path he will take, we shall wait and see. Alright, that's all for today. Friends, if you feel that today's program has helped you understand this person better, don't forget to give me a like. New friends, welcome to subscribe to this channel. Feel free to forward and share my videos with more friends so that more people can get to know who this newly appointed Attorney General really is. Friends, what do you think of this person? Do you think that under his leadership, the U.S. Department of Justice will improve, or will it be just as disappointing as the previous one? Share your thoughts in the comments. Alright, that's all for today. Wishing you all a wonderful weekend. I'll see you all again at the same time next Tuesday on Truzio. Bye!